What Michael saw in you might be the same thing you try to hide every day. And that's exactly why this video begins with a question that could transform your heart. What would someone so sensitive, so connected to what is most human, see if they were standing before your soul right now? Not the icon, not the star, but the man who dedicated his entire life to seeing beauty where the world saw chaos. That's the starting point. Because the title What Michael Saw in You, the hidden lesson that transforms the heart, it's not just a provocation, it's a mirror. And, in the next few minutes, I'm going to guide you to the answer that you've always felt deep down, but never had the courage to face. And before you continue, I need you to stay with me until the end, because there's a revelation in this script that only makes sense when the pieces fit together. And when they fit together, something inside you changes. Maybe subtly, maybe profoundly. But it changes, because Michael talked a lot about light. But he also talked, between the lines, about what happens when light meets our shadow. And that's what we're going to talk about here. That's what I'm going to guide you through. An emotional, cinematic, symbolic, profoundly human and absolutely real journey. Now take a deep breath, because the question that opens this story carries more weight than it seems. Why did Michael see so much value in people who didn't even believe they possessed anything special? Where did this unusual sensitivity come from? And more importantly, what would he specifically see in you? Have you ever noticed that there are people who can pierce the surface and touch who we truly are? People who, even without knowing your whole story, sense when you're broken, when you're trying to be strong, when you're holding the world with both hands while inside you're on the verge of collapsing. Michael was exactly like that. His sensitivity wasn't weakness, it was perception. It was deep listening. It was presence. It was the kind of emotional intelligence that doesn't need words to understand that someone is suffering. And here begins the part that might hurt a little, but it's a good pain, a healing pain. If Michael were standing before you today, he wouldn't ask you about your achievements, your titles, your mistakes, your failures, your appearance, your age. He wouldn't look at any of that. He would look for the part you try hardest to hide. The part you call a flaw, but which is actually just the wounded part that never had space to exist. The part that still believes it's not enough. The part that was silenced, criticized, rejected, molded to fit expectations that were never yours. And this is where the revelation begins. What Michael saw in people, was theoreginate, the label, not the mask, not the adaptation created to survive. He saw the beginning, the essence, the spark, the original light before it was extinguished by traumas, abandonment, rejection, comparisons, unrealistic demands and wounds that no one saw, or that, when they saw them, they chose to ignore. And this vision didn't come from a mystical place. It came from a human place. From someone who also carried pain, misunderstandings, pressures, and emotional scars. He didn't talk about light because he lived on a pedestal. He talked about light because he knew exactly the weight of living in darkness. And this combination, deep pain plus extreme sensitivity, created the ability to see what many didn't see. The hidden beauty within each person. But the central point is this. If he were with you now, he would see something you've forgotten, something you've dropped along the way. He would see your original light. Not that performative light you show when you say, everything's fine, but the real one. The one that comes when you allow yourself to be vulnerable, honest, human, imperfect, real. The truth is, you spent so much time trying to be strong that you forgot what it's like to be truly seen. And two, someone like Michael, you wouldn't just be another person. You would be someone with a story that doesn't yet have value. You would be someone trying to exist in the most beautiful way possible, even carrying pains the world can't imagine. You would be someone silently fighting not to lose your own light. And this is where I need you to stay with me, because in the following sections, we're going to delve into the deepest part of the hidden lesson that transformed so many hearts. The lesson that made people change their way of life simply by being seen by him. The lesson that can touch you now, if you allow it. The first part of this lesson is simple, yet powerful. No one loses their original light. It doesn't disappear. It just gets hidden. It becomes hidden when you carry a burden that shouldn't be yours alone. It gets hidden when you try to be perfect so as not to disappoint. It becomes hidden when you get used to surviving instead of living. It hides away when you feel you don't deserve love. It stays hidden when you learn not to bother anyone with your pain. It stays hidden when you convince yourself that it's not important. But it doesn't disappear. And here comes the second part of the lesson. The light only returns when you allow yourself to be seen. Michael didn't create light in people. He simply saw the light that already existed. And when someone is truly seen, something realigns inside. Self-esteem breathes. The heart reorganizes itself. The soul remembers who it was before it was broken. And that memory, that small memory, is often the beginning of a silent and profound transformation. Now I want you to honestly imagine what he would see in you. Not the version you think you need to show the world, but the version that exists when the lights go out, when no one is watching, when you are alone in your own silence. That's the version he would see first. And from that, he would see something even greater. Your capacity to love even after everything you've been through, your capacity to try even when tired, your capacity to care for others even when you miss having someone to care for you, your capacity to remain sensitive in a world that demanded coldness from you. And that's extraordinary. It's exactly the kind of thing that always caught his attention. And maybe you never realized it, but every time you got up after a Falavan tired, even doubting yourself, even with no one to notice your effort, you were showing exactly what Michael saw. In people, invisible resilience, the ability to keep going, even when the world offers no applause. The quiet courage to exist despite the burden. That's why he valued sensitivity so much. Not because it was too delicate, but because it needed to be too strong. Being sensitive requires a strength that the world rarely recognizes. And perhaps you, like him, learned this too early. But let's delve deeper now, because this journey isn't about admiration, it's about revelation. The real question isn't just ... double quotes. What did Michael see in you? The real question is, why can't you see that too? There's a part of you that still believes you're not enough, believes you're nothing special, believes you're not worthy of being seen. And that belief is what extinguishes the light. Not because the light ceases to exist, but because you stop looking at it. Have you ever noticed how many people spend their lives trying to prove their worth to the world, when, in reality, the only gaze that needs convincing is their own? Michael knew this. He spoke of love, healing, transformation, empathy, and none of it came from theory. It all came from the experience of someone who tried, for many years, to prove to the world that he was worthy of love. And yet, he discovered that this kind of validation never fills the void. What truly fulfills me is inner recognition. It's when you finally understand that there's something inside you that no one can take away. Something that doesn't depend on applause, opinion, comparison, or approval. Something that is uniquely yours, and that has always been yours. That something is your original light. It can get stuffy, it can be covered, it could be forgotten, but it cannot be destroyed. And here comes the deepest part of the hidden lesson. Your light is proof that you deserve to exist. Not because it's perfect, not because he never makes mistakes, not because he does everything right, but because there is something inside you that is capable of loving, of feeling, of perceiving the world in a unique way, and that in itself is extraordinary. If you could see yourself the way someone as sensitive as Michael would see you, perhaps you would realize that you were never ordinary. You just got used to believing you were. You got used to carrying burdens that aren't yours. You got used to being too strong. You got used to not asking for help. You got used to not showing your pain because you learned at some point in your life that feeling too much was wrong, but it isn't. Feeling too much is a superpower. That's exactly what makes you human. And now, let's touch on the most delicate part of all, in the shade. Because there is no light without shadow, and there is no healing without looking at what you've tried to ignore. If Michael were sitting across from you today, he would see your light. But he would also see your shadow, and he wouldn't judge you for it. He wouldn't criticize you. He wouldn't tell you that you need to be different. Immediately, he would acknowledge your pain. He would listen to your silence. He would perceive what hurt you, even if you didn't know how to explain it. And, with the same sensitivity he carried in his gaze, he would show you that the shadow is not an enemy, it's a plea for understanding. The shadow is the part that says, I just wanted to have been loved. I just wish I had been enough. I just wish I hadn't been left behind. I just wanted to not be afraid to exist. I just wish someone had stayed. And you spent years silencing that voice. Years of trying to be too strong. Years of trying to adapt so as not to be rejected. Years trying to prove he could carry everything on his own. But you don't need that anymore. And this is where the lesson intensifies. The light of someone like Michael never extinguished the shadow, it embraced it. He understood that it's impossible to heal what you reject. You can only heal what you look at honestly. You can only heal what you accept. You can only heal what you understand. And perhaps no one has told you this, so I'll say it now. With the seriousness of someone holding your hand through the screen, you are allowed to be human. You are allowed to feel. You are allowed to be vulnerable. You are allowed not to be strong all the time. You are allowed to exist even without knowing exactly who you are. You are allowed to cry when it hurts. It has permission to rebuild, even if slowly. And it is precisely this permission that awakens its light. Because the moment you acknowledge your own humanity, something within you realigns. Your breathing changes. Your heart softens. Your soul finds space to reorganize itself. This is the lesson that transformed hearts. Being seen heals. And being truly seen heals even more. Now, imagine that he looks at you and says not with words, but with his presence, that you don't need to be perfect to be loved. That you don't need to hide your heart to be accepted. That your sensitivity is not a mistake, but a gift. That your pain is not a failure, but evidence that you still feel. That your story is not a reason for shame, but proof that you survived. And that changes everything. Because when someone sees your essence, you begin to see it too. And when you begin to see, you change your relationship with yourself, with the world, with life, with its own light. From this point on, we enter a deeper layer. One where you need to confront not only what Michael saw in you, but what you avoid seeing in yourself. Because, the truth is, the greatest battle of your life was never against the world, it was against your own silence. There's a part of you that has learned to protect yourself from everything. Hiding the pain, silencing emotions, silencing dreams, carrying burdens that weren't even theirs. Accepting less than you deserve, in order not to lose anyone. Wiping away tears quickly, so that no one would notice how much you were struggling. And the most painful thing is that many of these attitudes arose without you even realizing it. They were born from an age-old fear of not being loved, or of being abandoned, or of being rejected for who you really are. And when that fear takes hold, the person begins to mold themselves to fit into places that, deep down, were never home. But Michael could see that. He could see beyond the armor, through the part that tried to be too strong, because it never had the chance to simply be cared for. Through the inner child holding the world in its hands, trying not to disappoint anyone. Through the soul that simply needed a safe place to rest. And perhaps you'll see yourself in that. Perhaps you've always been the kind of person who solves everything, who supports everyone, who is strong for others, but who rarely has someone to be strong for you. Perhaps you were always the foundation and no one noticed when you started to crack from the inside. And here is one of the most exciting parts of the hidden lesson. There is a huge difference between being strong and being forced to be strong. One is born of freedom. The other one stems from trauma. And you, perhaps, you've carried this forced strength for so long that you've even forgotten what it's like to be light. Now imagine that he looks at you, not as someone trying to decipher you, but as someone who recognizes the weariness hidden between the lines, and simply sees. He perceives the weight. He sees the loneliness. he sees the effort. He sees the silent courage. You see the emotional exhaustion that you never knew where to put. It is this perspective that transforms. Because when someone notices your tiredness without you having to explain it, your heart breathes. And when the heart breathes, the soul finds space to reorganize itself. And here comes another part of the lesson. You don't have to carry everything alone. Did you learn that? Maybe not. Perhaps he learned the opposite, that asking for help is a sign of weakness. Showing pain is wrong too. Feel too much is an exaggeration. To say that talking about oneself is selfish, that crying is shameful. But these ideas were never his. They were taught, pushed, forced. These were words that touched you at a vulnerable moment and settled in as truths. And since then, you've been trying to be something you can no longer sustain. But here's the point. It's not your obligation to be indestructible. It wasn't supposed to happen, and Michael knew that. He never asked for perfection. He never asked for masks. He never asked for absolute strength. He was asking for humanity. And humanity includes flaws, fears, wounds, and moments of darkness. And perhaps you fear this darkness that exists within you. Perhaps you think it weakens you. But I'll tell you something with the seriousness of someone who deeply analyzes human behavior. Darkness is not the opposite of light, it's part of it. Without night, there is no dawn. Without shadow, there is no depth. Without pain, there is no understanding. Without falling, there is no rising. And that is why the light Michael saw was not perfect light. It was a light full of cracks, and that's precisely why it's shown in such a unique way. Now, think about the times when you felt invisible. In those moments when her pain seemed too small to be spoken, yet too great to bear. Think about the times you wanted to be noticed, but didn't know how to ask. Those times when you wished someone would notice without you having to explain. For those times when you wished to be understood, even in silence. It is in these places that its light is hidden. And here we arrive at a crucial point. You only understand the value of your light when you face your shadow without running away. And if you are here now, reading this with an open heart, perhaps this is exactly the moment in your life when that understanding is finally trying to emerge. Maybe you're tired of hiding. Maybe you're tired of pretending everything is okay. Perhaps you're tired of carrying this pain alone. Maybe you're tired of being strong for everyone, while no one realizes that you need a hug too. But there is beauty even in that. Because only those who have felt broken are able to recognize the pain of others. Only those who have felt fear are capable of offering true courage. Only those who have been in the dark know how precious it is to find a small beam of light, and that's why you're valuable. Not despite his wounds, but because of them. And if you could see yourself through that perspective, the light that is born from pain perhaps, you would finally understand what Michael saw. Not a perfect person, but a profound soul. A soul capable of feeling, transforming, inspiring, and loving intensely and honestly. A soul that is still learning how to exist. And that's already extraordinary. Now, let me take you deeper because this story hasn't yet reached its final revelation, the one that truly transforms the heart. In the following sections, you will understand something you may never have realized about yourself, and that could completely change your relationship with your light and your shadow. From this moment on, we enter the most intimate core of the journey, the point where you are not only understanding what Michael saw in you, but beginning to realize that this vision was never about perfection. It was about potential. And, perhaps for the first time, you are about to see parts of yourself that have always existed, but that you never allowed to shine. Because there's something very important that nobody taught you. The pain you carry doesn't diminish the value of your light, reveals its intensity. Shallow people don't feel deeply. Shallow people don't love deeply. Shallow people don't break down intensely because they never get involved enough to do so. The depth of your pain is, in fact, direct proof of the depth of your capacity to love, to feel, to connect, to transform. And Michael knew that. He knew that the most sensitive people carry deep scars, not because they are fragile, but because they truly open themselves up to the world. Because they care, because they feel too much. because they love too much, because they absorb the suffering of others as if it were their own. And that's not a flaw, that's emotional greatness. Now think about how many times you've been criticized for being that way. How many times have people told you that you were dramatic, exaggerated, intense, complicated, or too sensitive? And without realizing it, you are hiding parts of yourself so as not to bother anyone, not to draw attention, not to be judged. But every time you hid a part of yourself, you hid a piece of your light along with it. And that's exactly what you're here to rescue. Because the truth is, if Michael were standing before you today, he wouldn't see your flaws the way the world does. He would see through your intention, your effort, its purity, his desire to do the right thing even when he makes mistakes. Your weary heart tries to keep going even when no one notices how much it hurts. He would see the soul behind your fears, and that soul is much bigger than you imagine. Perhaps you've spent so much time believing you need to be stronger, more confident, more secure, more perfect, more adjusted, that you've forgotten to see the truth. You are already more than enough. And it's not enough because it does everything right. It is enough because it is felt deeply. It is sufficient. Because it seeks meaning. It's enough because he tries. Because it's imported. Because he loves. Because she gives herself. Because even broken, it keeps walking. And that ability to keep going was something Michael deeply admired in people. He didn't look at what you should be. He was looking at who you really are. And who you truly are has a beauty that you haven't fully understood yet. Now, let's touch on the most sensitive part of this chapter, the fear of abandonment. Almost all sensitive people carry, to some degree, the fear of being abandoned. Sometimes due to childhood experiences, sometimes because of emotional wounds that never received attention, sometimes due to broken bonds throughout life, sometimes because of expectations that were never met. Sometimes it's because of people who weren't prepared to love someone as deeply as you. But that fear doesn't define you. It just shows how much you value the connection. It shows that you don't give things halfway. It shows that when she loves with her whole soul. And those who love like that inevitably fear losing. But here's the truth you need to hear carefully. It's not that you're difficult to love. It's that people weren't prepared to handle your depth. And that's not your fault. It never was. Michael could see deep souls. He was a profound soul, and that's why he could immediately recognize who harbored intense and genuine feelings. If he were standing in front of you, he would see exactly this: a rare soul trying to survive in a world too noisy for its sensitivity. And he would tell you, perhaps without words, that there is nothing wrong with you. There is so much beauty that it has yet to find the right place to be embraced. Now, I need to take you to the next point of this revelation, the relationship between pain and purpose. Have you ever noticed that the people who have been hurt the most are the ones who are most able to help others because they understand pain? They feel the pain, they acknowledge the pain, and because they have lived in darkness, they know exactly how to offer light. That's purpose. Purpose is not some grand, distant destination. It's the ability to transform your story into healing for someone else. It's the effect of its light on the world, even when that light flickers sometimes. Michael talked a lot about healing, and it wasn't a theoretical cure. It was an emotional healing, silent, intimate. The healing that begins when someone feels they are not alone. When someone realizes that there is beauty even in pain. When someone understands that there is value even in scars. And this is the point. Perhaps your greatest strength has always been precisely in the parts you tried hardest to hide, because that's where their truth resides. Your sensitivity, their capacity for empathy, your potential to transform the world around you. Now think about how many people have felt peace simply because you exist. How many have felt understood simply by the way they listened. How many have found strength just by seeing you keep going, even when you're tired. How many have been inspired because you didn't give up? You may not have realized it, but your small, daily acts of resistance have already touched lives. Your original light, the one you've forgotten, has already illuminated someone's path, and it lit up without you realizing it. Imagine what would happen when you finally did. That's where the transformation begins. Not the perfect meditative transformation, but the real, emotional, human transformation. The transformation of those who decide to stop running from their own shadow and begin to see their light honestly. And I want to guide you even deeper. Because there's a point in this journey that, when understood, changes everything. The light you seek is not outside, it is within. It always has been. The world tried to convince you otherwise. Hurt people tried to belittle you. Unfair situations have made you doubt. Painful experiences have made you hide your heart. But the truth never changed. The light is yours. And from here, we'll delve into the most intense revelation. The one that connects everything from the title to the heart of the final message. Get ready, because the next part is where the transformation really happens. We've now reached the part of the journey where revelation ceases to be a poetic idea and becomes something visceral, something you feel in your body, in your breath, in your memory, in your soul. Because understanding what Michael saw in you isn't just about sensitivity, it's about identity. It's about what you were born to be, but forgot along the way. And the truth is, you weren't born carrying fear. He wasn't born carrying guilt. He wasn't born believing he needed to prove his worth in order to exist. This was learned, that was absorbed. This was forced upon you by experiences, words, glances, rejections, comparisons, and expectations that were never your own. But there is an untouchable part of you, a part that was never lost, and that's exactly the part he would see first. And perhaps you've never stopped to think about it, but the people who hide their light the most are precisely those who possess it the most. Because those who feel deeply also suffer deeply. And those who suffer deeply end up creating mechanisms to avoid feeling so much. Mechanisms that appear to be protective, but which, in reality, imprison the soul. You are familiar with these mechanisms. Silencing feelings, controlling emotions, avoid deep attachments, to avoid getting hurt. Pretending to be strong when you're falling apart inside. Doing everything alone so as not to bother anyone. Putting everyone else first and yourself last. To live constantly apologizing for existing. Accepting little because you feel you don't deserve much. Dim your lights so you don't dazzle anyone. But most importantly, to avoid being seen. And that is the deepest wound in his history. Because when you don't allow yourself to be seen, you also don't allow your light to be seen. And when its light is not seen, you begin to doubt whether it exists. But it exists. It has always existed. And now I want you to honestly imagine what would happen if someone could truly see you. Not the controlled version, not the adapted version, not the version that tries not to bother anyone. But that's the version that exists when you're alone with your thoughts. The version that feels too much. Who loves too much. Someone who notices details that nobody else notices. Carrying burdens of pain never spoken of. Who talks to themselves in silence, staring into the void, trying to find answers. She wants to be understood without having to explain everything. This is the version that Michael would see, and he would see with gentleness, not with judgment. With acceptance, not with pressure. With presence, not with demands. Because he knew that people like you don't need someone to correct them, they need someone to see them. And here is one of the most beautiful truths of this journey. When you are finally seen, the soul finds rest. She releases the trapped air. She allows herself to exist. She allows herself to feel. She allows herself to shine again. And maybe you don't remember what that feeling is like. The feeling of not having to pretend. To not need to be strong all the time. So you don't have to carry everything alone. So you don't have to apologize for feeling. So you don't have to justify your tears. No need to hide your intensity. But that feeling exists. She lies there, asleep, waiting for the right moment to awaken. And this script, this very moment, is igniting that flame within you. Now I need to take you to the deepest part of the revelation. The light that Michael saw in people had nothing to do with perfection. It had everything to do with truth. The truth of what you feel. The truth about what you fear. The truth about what you desire. The truth of their story. The truth about their wounds. The truth of your love. the truth of your sensitivity, the truth of what makes your heart sing. And it is precisely this truth that you have been hiding in order to survive. But hiding the truth never protected you, it only distanced you from yourself. Now think about how many times in your life you simply wished to be accepted for who you truly were. Think about how many times you've tried to fit in just to avoid being rejected. Think about how many times you kept quiet when you wanted to scream. How many times did she smile when she wanted to cry? How many times did he feign strength because he thought he would be abandoned if he showed weakness? How many times have you put yourself last so as not to lose anyone? And yet, even hurt, you continued to love. He kept trying. He continued to surrender. He continued to believe in the light. He continued searching for beauty. He continued wanting to do good. That's exactly what he would see in you, a heart that doesn't give up, even wounded, even though I'm tired, even though I'm scared, even without having received everything he deserved. You can't imagine the power that exists within that. And here we enter one of the most exciting parts of this journey, the way your soul communicates with the world. Perhaps you think it makes no difference. Perhaps you think it doesn't impact anyone. But there's something about you, a gesture, a look, a way of perceiving things, a subtle sweetness that changes people without you even realizing it. Have you ever calmed someone down simply by being present? It has already inspired someone simply by continuing. He has healed someone simply by listening. She has already transformed someone simply by existing. And this is where you need to take a deep breath, because now comes a powerful truth. You are much greater than the world has led you to believe. And that's why its light has always bothered so many people. Light bothers eyes. Accustomed to shadow, sensitivity bothers those who live numb. Depth frightens those who only know how to live on the surface. The truth frightens those who have become accustomed to masks. And that's why so many people didn't know how to deal with you. They weren't able to see what you were carrying. But someone like Michael would see it. And not only would I see it, Ad would appreciate it. Admirations, it would protect. Honorary, because deep souls recognize other deep souls. And you are one of them. Now, we've reached a crucial point. The moment you stop asking, what would he see in me? And start asking, why can't I see that too? This question is the beginning of the healing process. Because from that point on, you stop being a spectator of your own story and begin to be its author. Start looking at yourself more honestly. Start treating yourself with more kindness. Begin to recognize its light, even on days when it seems dimmed. You begin to understand that your wounds don't define your worth, they only reveal your depth. And that's what sets the stage for the final revelation. The revelation that unites light, shadow, pain, sensitivity, and purpose into a single understanding. The revelation that transforms the heart. And she arrives in the next part. Now we enter the part of the journey where the truth finally finds its place. Not the truth that hurts, not the truth that weighs you down, but the truth that sets you free. The one that emerges when you stop running from your own depths and begin to see that everything the world made you believe about yourself was never the complete version of your story. Because the greatest revelation isn't what Michael saw in you. It is, why did you stop seeing that in yourself? And that answer, though painful, is also the most transformative. She asks for courage. She asks for silence. She's asking for breath. She demands your presence. And above all, it demands honesty, not with others, but with yourself. So quiet down that internal noise of rushing and listen with an open heart. At some point in your life, you believed that you weren't enough. Not because that was the truth, but that was the narrative they offered you, and you didn't have the strength to question it. Perhaps it was a minor criticism that was repeated until it became a certainty. Perhaps it was an unfair comparison. Perhaps it was abandonment. Perhaps it was rejection. Perhaps it was a love that didn't know how to love you. Perhaps it was someone who didn't see value in you because they didn't know how to see value in themselves. Perhaps it was a wound that no one noticed, but one that marked her soul forever. And you began to believe that feeling too much was a flaw, that being sensitive was a weakness, to think that being profound was excessive, that being honest was dangerous, that being vulnerable was risky. To say that showing one's heart was asking to be hurt was tantamount to implying being hurt. And so, in order to survive, you began to hide from yourself. He began to create layers, masks, structures, strategies. She started smiling when she didn't want to. He started to fall silent when he needed to speak. He began to adapt when he should have expressed himself. He started accepting crumbs when he deserved the whole world. She started pretending it didn't hurt so that no one would notice her vulnerability. But in the process of protecting yourself, you distanced yourself from your own light. And here's a truth you may never have heard before. The protection you created to avoid being hurt has become the barrier that prevents you from being seen. And to be seen, truly seen, is the only way for the soul to breathe. That's exactly what Michael understood so well. He understood that people don't hide their light because they want to. They hide it because they're afraid. Fear of being rejected for being who they are. Fear of being judged for the intensity they carry. Fear of being called fragile, when, in fact, they are too strong. Fear of not being enough. Fear of being forgotten. And perhaps you know this fear intimately. But now, here, at this point in this journey, I need you to understand something essential. If someone like him would see beauty in you, it's because that beauty exists and has always existed, regardless of your awareness of it. Its light is not small. Its light is not weak. Its light is not accidental. It was simply obscured by the weight of the experiences you lived through. Now imagine, for a moment, that this sensitive, welcoming, and profound gaze is upon you right now. He doesn't see his own appearance. He doesn't see your tiredness. He doesn't see his own flaws. He doesn't see his mistakes. He doesn't see his defenses. He doesn't see their masks. He sees his truth. And that truth is the most beautiful part of your existence, because it is in this truth that your love resides. It is in this truth that your courage resides. It is in this truth that its purpose resides. It is in this truth that her sensitivity resides. It is in this truth that its ability to touch lives resides. It is in this truth that its light resides. And you don't have to do anything to deserve it. It doesn't depend on your performance. It doesn't depend on your appearance. It doesn't depend on your history. It doesn't depend on who treated you badly. It doesn't depend on your fears. It doesn't depend on your failures, she simplified. You are trying to acquire something you already possess. Now, here, I'm going to guide you through a reflection that few have the courage to face and that can completely change the way you see yourself. Do you remember the last time you were truly yourself, without fear, no pressure, no expectations, no adaptation required? Without armor, no need to prove it, without the pressure of trying to please. Without that feeling of needing to be less so as not to bother anyone. Perhaps that memory is distant. Perhaps it stems from childhood. Perhaps it comes from a specific moment. Perhaps it comes from someone who is no longer here. Maybe you don't even remember anymore. But there is a reason for this. The purest version of who you are has been wounded, silenced, and molded not because there was anything wrong with it, but because the world wasn't ready to receive it. But now, unlike before, you're starting to be ready to see her again. And it is precisely here, at this point in the journey, that you need to hear the truth that closes this emotional cycle. What Michael saw in you is exactly what you need to learn to see as well. He saw sensitivity, and you treated it as weakness. He saw depth, and you treated it as exaggeration. He saw love, and you treated him as a risk. He saw light, and you treated it as shadow. He saw beauty, and you treated it as inadequacy. He saw emotional strength, and you treated it as a dangerous vulnerability. He saw the truth, and you treated it as something to hide. But it doesn't have to be this way anymore, because the final revelation of this journey is drawing near. A revelation that doesn't give you a ready-made answer, but returns something you've lost, the right to exist with truth. And in the next part, you will understand how to recover that light, how to reconcile with your history, and how to transform everything you have experienced into strength, not rigid strength, but human, emotional, luminous strength. The strength that, deep down, has always been within you. The strength he would have seen, even when you didn't see it. We've reached a point in the journey where the question that remains is no longer what did Michael see in you, but rather the question that truly matters. What will you do with this light now that you've begun to see it? Because up to this point, you've understood your sensitivity, your depth, your shadows, your original light. You've understood that none of this diminishes you, and the contrary. It all reveals you. But one essential piece is still missing. A piece that closes the circle of this emotional journey. Reconciliation. Not reconciliation with other people. Not with the past. Not with the person who hurt you. Not with someone who couldn't love you with the intensity you deserved. But the most difficult reconciliation of all. Reconciliation with oneself. And before continuing, take a breath, slowly. Honestly, because what comes next is too profound to be read in haste. Let's start by facing a truth that many avoid. You don't see yourself as you should because you still look at yourself through the lens of old wounds. Lenses that were never yours. Lenses that someone has placed upon you. Lenses that distorted your perception. Lenses that made you doubt your own soul. And while you look at yourself through these lenses, nothing that is said about its light will make sense. Because you will continue to believe you are less than you actually are. But these lenses can be removed, one by one. When you begin to understand that your story is not a draft that needs to be erased, it is a work in progress. With flaws, yes. With shadows, yes. With falls, yes. With regrets, yes. But also with courage. Beautiful with sensitivity, deeply with light. And now I'm going to tell you something that might touch a nerve, but it needs to be said. You no longer need to punish yourself for being too sensitive in a world that didn't know how to accept you. Your sensitivity did not put you in danger. What hurt you was giving your soul to people who weren't ready to receive it. But that doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a brave person. Someone who tried to love genuinely. Someone who believed in the best in others. Someone who surrendered even though they were afraid. And now, something is beginning to be revealed. Something you may not have noticed until now. The pain you carried didn't destroy you. It deepened you. And this depth is rare. It's precious. That's where its true strength lies. Now I need to take you to the most delicate part of this reconciliation. The forgiveness you owe yourself. Yes, sorry. Because, deep down, there's a part of you that blames itself for having loved too much. Another one who blames herself for not having been stronger. Another one who blames herself for giving in. Another one who blames herself for having distanced herself. Another one who blames herself for having trusted. Another one who blames herself for having tried. Another one who blames herself for staying. Another one who blames herself for having left. Another one who blames herself for getting hurt. But all of this stems from the same root. You blame yourself for being human, and it is this guilt that needs to be released, because you weren't wrong for feeling. You didn't do anything wrong by trying. You didn't do anything wrong by loving. You weren't wrong for believing. You didn't do anything wrong by giving your heart away. You weren't wrong for wanting reciprocity. You didn't do anything wrong by seeking connection. You didn't do anything wrong by being you. You only erred in a human sense when you thought that being human was a mistake. And now the time has come to put an end to this lie. Now comes the moment of revelation that Michael saw, but you didn't yet. Your light is not in who you should be. It's in who you already are. And her sensitivity is not a flaw, it's her emotional signature. Its depth is not an exaggeration. It's its inner reach. Your shadow is not a flaw. It's your invitation to healing. Your pain is not weakness. It is the flame of your transformation. Your vulnerability is not a risk. It's your bridge to true love. His intensity isn't the problem, it's his ability to live with soul. Now imagine that someone, deeply human and sensitive, looks at each of these parts as if they were pieces of a masterpiece. And he doesn't see imperfection. He sees authenticity. He doesn't see excess. He sees truth. He sees no fragility. He sees courage. That person would see exactly what Michael saw. and you would also see what you are beginning to see now. But for this transformation to be complete, there is one final step, perhaps the most challenging, but also the most liberating. You need to learn to stand by your own soul, to stand by her side when she doubts, when she cries, when he fears, when you feel too much, when you feel ashamed, when you try, when it fails, when you feel afraid of being abandoned, when you feel afraid of being rejected, when you're afraid of being forgotten, when you feel afraid of not being enough. You need to be the shelter you've always sought, because that's what heals, that's what transforms, that's what restores its light. And it is precisely from this that we arrive at the final revelation, the one that changes everything, the one that ties together all the pieces of this journey, the one that explains not only what he saw, but what you need to learn too. See, we've reached the moment that connects everything you've experienced up to this point. The final key, the final revelation, the part that transforms the heart, because, unlike the others, it doesn't speak to what someone else saw in you. But that's what you ultimately need to learn to see. And this revelation is simple, profound, and inescapable. The light that Michael saw in you is the same light you've been trying to hide for years. He didn't see an ideal. I didn't see what you should be. I didn't see what the world demanded. He saw you for who you really are, without masks, without filters, without defenses. And now you need to understand what that really means. The light you try to hide is precisely the part of you that has been hurt, the part that was rejected, the party that asked for help and didn't receive it, the part that had big dreams and ended up shrinking to fit in, the part of her that loved with all her soul and was criticized for it, the part that felt too much and was called exaggerated, the part that cried alone because it didn't want to bother anyone, the part of her that blamed herself for everything, even for things that weren't her fault. That part you hide, is where your light lives, and that's why it hurts, because it's real, because it's true, because it is profound, because it's yours. And now, I want you to understand something you may never have heard before. You don't need to be so strong anymore. It doesn't have to be perfect anymore. You don't need to prove anything anymore. You no longer need to reduce its intensity. You no longer need to hide what you feel. You no longer need to apologize for being sensitive. You no longer need to turn off your own light so that no one will be bothered. Now you can exist. And to truly exist is this. Be light and toe, be a shadow. To be strong and buying fragility. To be profound and toe, be vulnerable. To be sensitive and toe, be brave. Human being, completely human. The ultimate truth. That concludes this journey, is this. The light he saw in you is the same light you came into the world carrying. She never disappeared. She was just waiting for you to come back and get her. And from here on out, you no longer walk in the dark, because now you know where your light was all along. She was in her silent tears, tears that showed concern. It was in her courage to continue when no one noticed that showed strength. It was in her profound sensitivity which revealed greatness. It was in his pain which showed his humanity. It was in her love which showed purity. It was in your fear that showed how much you care. It was in her scars, scars that showed survival. It was in its shadows which revealed depth. It was in his dreams, dreams that revealed purpose. And now she is here, awake, alight, seen. And I need to tell you this with all possible sincerity. If someone like Michael could see that light in you, then it exists. And it exists in a magnificent way. You are not invisible. You are not small. You are not weak. You are not insufficient. You're not too much. You are not less important. You are profound. You are vast. You are sensitive. You are intense. You are human. You are light. And the greatest hidden lesson, the one that transforms the heart, is not about what he saw. This is something you also need to start looking into. The light that Michael saw in you was, in fact, a reflection of what he had always been trying to awaken within you. And now he has awakened. Right now, at this very moment, you are reclaiming something you lost along the way. The right to exist with truth, no longer hidden, no longer diminished, No longer silenced, no longer adapted, no longer erased, but whole. And if you take only one thing away from this journey, let it be this: the most beautiful part of you isn't what you show the world, it's what you haven't had the courage to show yet. This is the part that contains its light. It is this light that transforms the heart, and it is this transformation that begins today, here, in you. Now, take a deep breath, times like this, and allow this light to continue growing, because she is yours. It always has been. And the world, even if it doesn't know it yet, needs her.